All right. So I figured the best place to explain our defensive mechanisms was in the middle of a million mobs, where we can limit test our defenses, so to speak, right? So what's happening here? How are we surviving all this bullshit? So basically, the fundamentals of this recovery mechanic is that as chaos inoculation, your stun threshold is one life. We can kind of bypass the feeling of getting stunned by using the immutable force, which reduces the stun duration to like 3 milliseconds. And being able to be stunned itself allows us to use the notable called Trial of the Faith. Now, what this notable does is that we regenerate 5% of our ES and 5% of our life when we do get stunned. This is really strong when we combine it with the Zealot's Oath keystone, which converts life regeneration to energy shield. So instead of just regenerating 5% life and 5% ES, we now regenerate 10% energy shield. We can combine this with some other recovery mechanics such as ES on block, and I also have a ES on Hitwatcher's Eye, which is activated through like a firestorm cast one damage taking setup. So basically, as you can see, we're just constantly getting ES on hit, getting ES on block, as well as regenerating ES over time. And this allows kind of like a witch, which doesn't have a lot of natural access to mechanics. Like we have no armor, we have no evasion rating, we have no spell suppression, but we're still able to kind of survive hits, right? And we do have max block. And I guess the point of this demonstration is to show that we can survive a lot of spell hits, but the idea is that, of course, in practice, you're not going to be standing still for things to hit you, and when you are adding the defensive layer or just moving around, which cold dot skills are very good at, you're going to be having a lot more survivability as well. Aside from recovery, going over the build itself, so wanted to play some Wintertide Brand in the Phrecia League event, and it seemed that the Bog Shaman class was probably the best ascendancy for this skill. But honestly, in retrospect, I discovered that Bog Shaman is most definitely bait if you are a newer Path of Exile player. Mostly because while the class does have some very powerful things going for it, in order to access this power, you have to solve some detrimental trade-offs that come with getting that power. That being said, I personally did find it very satisfying to solve these interlocking puzzles because it kind of necessitates some creative solutions that you wouldn't otherwise consider. For example, the Pandemic Keystone grants 40% more damage over time, but it comes at the cost of losing 5% of your life per second if you have been hit recently. Now, the most common way that I've seen people deal with this is to go Chaos Inoculation, which sets your lives to 1, and then just have any amount of flat life regeneration in your build, which will just out-regen the health loss. But if you remember from earlier, we are taking the Zealot's Oath Keystone, which converts all life regen to ES regen. So how do we recover HP? To recover life in our build, we actually use a large cluster jewel with the notable Doriani's Lesson, which leeches 0.2% of elemental damage as life. Yes, we are unironically leeching life as a CI character. So our main skill, Wintertide Brand, has no hit, so it cannot leech. But our cast one damage taken setup, which triggers Firestorm and Bolt Lightning, these both activate whenever we do take damage. So it will just leech the life, or we can just cold snap whenever we feel like it. And this here is actually really cool because I bet that you've never seen a Chaos Inoculation HP bar visually drop below 100%. So putting together this character was definitely an adventure, but it was also a lot of fun. And the character did end up taking on all of the content in the game, including all 7 Uber bosses. So I usually don't do POB reviews for my builds because I don't like sitting in POB, but I feel like there's just so much going on in this situation that I think is warranted that we do a quick overview. And I think the best place to start is just by going over the Ascendancy because, well, all the problems start there, right? So, what the fuck is it? What the fuck is my Ascendancy? Oh, here. So playing Bog Shaman, the order I will go is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then basically the problems that we have to solve, minus 20 all res, just get more res. So 5% of life per second, as mentioned earlier, we are using Life Leech to recover this. And then the last Ascendancy, Venom Drinker, this just reads, because we're CI that when we're poisoned, we have plus 5 all res. And as CI, we don't, take any chaos damage, and that's the main reason we do go CI because if you're not CI, if you're getting constantly poisoned, as like for example, like a low life character, you can't regenerate your energy shield, right? And then val implications. This should be the first instance you take, and this just has no downside, which is strange for this class, right? So one of the things that's is very important in this build is a low life. So Wintertide Brand, like most dot builds, you have this problem where you kind of run out of damage ways to scale it, which means that you have to take spell pain attunement, because this is 30% more spell damage while you're on low life. But we're CI, which makes our life 1, which means we cannot be low life. So how is this happening? We're using a Coward's Legacy chain belt, which basically reads that we are cursed with vulnerability and we are counting as low life when we are cursed with vulnerability. So this way we are still getting that pain attunement, more spell damage bonus, even though that we're Chaos Inoculation. As you can imagine, now we have more problems to solve, because the problem with this belt is that there's two problems. So number one, we're cursed with vulnerability, and vulnerability itself, it basically you take more physical damage, and any hit that does hit you while you're cursed with vulnerability has like a 25 chance to inflict bleeding, which is obviously terrible for energy shield, because you can't regenerate your energy shield if you're bleeding, right? There's another part of this which is terrible, which is that you have 50% effective curses on you, regardless of if it's vulnerability or not. So if you're getting cursed with like elemental weakness, it's 50% more effective because you have this belt on. And all of those things are terrible, and we're going to mitigate those things. So I think the best way to start is like let's talk about the effective curses. So a couple of ways to do this. People sometimes use like Viridi's Veil, Edziri's Reflection. The way we do it, we're going to do the hard way. We're just going to get minus 150 effective curses. So there's a couple sources of this. Some of the largest sources are 50% reduced effective curses on this nameless ring. The Pantheon Yugal, 30%, 20% here, 15% here, and then we're just using some tattoos that have 6% reduced effective curses. And then this is really flexible, because let's say you don't have some of these sources, you can just get a couple more of these tattoos. You got plenty of int nodes to kind of solve that, right? So great, we have solved the curse effect issue. Next, vulnerability. So given that you have 150% reduced effective curses, you're now curse immune, regardless of if it's just vulnerability or not. Moving on to vulnerability. So even though we're curse immune, to the effective curses itself, we still have a chance to be bled on hit, which is terrible, right? So the way we mitigate this is we're just going to craft some boots with avoid chance to be bled, right? And this also is combined with our chance to avoid shocked, which we also use a storm shelf for, and so we're bleed immune and ailment immune. Great. And then honestly, after that, I feel like most of the problems are solved, and it just comes down to getting more damage and more ES, right? So I guess a couple of things. So just looking at the tree, I think the most important thing is this massive cluster drill here. This is very efficient, because it picks up a lot of very important and powerful notables, and of course we're picking up this regeneration keystone, which is very cool. I would never pass through here normally, but this cluster drill was able to pick it up for free. Some other things, we're using the light of meaning, lots of cold damage here. Of course, we're taking glancing blows with our block, with cap block. We do need one block tattoo here. Some other finicky things, you might be wondering why in the world we have General's Cry on our build. That's because we are having a medium cluster drill with a lead by example mastery or notable, which basically says that if we've War Cry recently, we have Onslaught. Because General's Cry has a 3-second cooldown, we basically have permanent Onslaught just by reserving 15% for auto exertion. Another thing is that we have frenzy charges. So this part's really scuffed, to be honest. Basically, I Orb of Conflicted all the way up to tier 5 to get the frenzy charge every 11 seconds. By taking this small node, which increases duration by 20%. Your frenzy charges last 12 seconds. You get one every 11 seconds, and then that means you have permanent frenzy charges, right? It's a lot of damage, but honestly, it was terrible to craft. The rest of the gear, it's pretty simple. Just just kind of meta crafted, falso crafted with Fracture modifiers. I think probably the hardest to craft is the shield. I would say that the best way to start is just to have the two suffixes, Stalkated Gems, Reservation Efficiency, as well as the Recover Energy Shield on block. And then after that, I would fill suffixes and then clean prefixes. Once you have clean prefixes, Wild Bristle Matron, Reforge Cold until you hit +1 all cold, or just a high tier of cold damage, and then you can just craft increased chance to block. For our Forbidden set, we're using the Phrecia Wake. Basically, you can't see here, but basically it just says more cold damage. You might freeze things every 4 seconds. Also, there's like 10% reduced damage taken from physical hits, which is kind of like a mini fortify, and that actually kind of stacks with the Malediction, which also is another 10%. So you're taking like minus 20% phys damage from hits, which is kind of like really cool because that's like a mini fortify for free. And I think that's about it. So yeah, final comment is if you want to give this a try, good luck.